Ursula Renold is the head of research division at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. In addition, she's the chairman of the University Board for the University of Applied Sciences and Arts of Northwestern Switzerland. She was a visiting fellow at Harvard Graduate School of Education between September 2012 and March of 2013. Prior to that, she was the Director General of the Federal Office of Professional Education and Technology until June of 2012. In that position, she headed Switzerland's Competence Center for Professional Education, Universities of Applied Sciences and Innovation. Before becoming the Director General, she was head of OPET, which is the Federal Office for Professional Education I referred to earlier, Vocational Education and Training Division, and Director of the Swiss Federal Institute of Vocational Education and Training for All Teacher Education. She holds an honorary professorship in professional education at the University of Applied Labor Sciences from Germany. And she is a member of the International Advisory Group, Rodel Foundation, Delaware, and of the International Expert Panel out of Pearson in London. In her current role, she's responsible for developing the Swiss education system and is currently heading a research center for comparative education systems. During her career, she has launched numerous key initiatives which have had great impact on vocational and professional education and training systems in Switzerland. Her pioneering approach is recognized as one of the most highly ranked education systems in the world, and Switzerland has become the model for career readiness. They intentionally developed an employer-driven education and training system that provides paid, work-based learning experiences to approximately 70% of Swiss youth, starting in high school, which is remarkable. Other countries, as well as states in the U.S., and here most notably Colorado, are working to implement key elements of this Swiss system to address the skills gap and improve learning and employment outcomes for high school students and young adults. So I would love to give Ursula a huge Hoosier welcome and bring her to the podium to talk about the nexus between education, employment, and vocational training systems. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, dear Alison, for this wonderful welcome. I'm so happy to be with you. First time for me here in Indianapolis, and having such a great audience, it was really a surprise to me, and I feel challenged to give you good food for thought. So I will start with introduction of what is the Swiss VPET system, the dual vocational and professional education and training system. What is that? I continue to explain you a little bit why the whole focus of the world is looking at Switzerland. We receive dozens of delegation every year who want to learn why it works like that in Switzerland. So I give you an appetizer of what we can explain you when you attend a 10-day seminar, as Claire, for example, and her team did this summer in Switzerland. Why VPET works in Switzerland, I will highlight a little bit or uncover the recipe of the Swiss vocational education and training system, and I basically end up with what are the most important factor if you want to think about having a similar system. What is that? So here you see it with this animated slide. Dual vocational education training is connecting theory with practice, and that every week. That means our 70%, I would say it's in your country the 10th grader, they start in a company working 3 to 4 days a week in a company, and the rest of the week they are learning the theoretical part of their occupation at the VED school. And the good thing, which is of course important for young people, like we have here Molly, a high school junior here, what is for the young people important is to have at the end a currency, means a federal diploma or something which really matters, where the country knows what this is about, because nowadays without certificates or diploma, it's very difficult to get into a good job. Then the next point, which is also a little bit special in Switzerland, is that our dual vocational education training is basically the main route in the upper secondary education. That means 60 to 70% of a cohort is applying for a job as an apprentice in the apprenticeship market. So it's the first exposure to a real apprenticeship, to a real market. And this, of course, you can understand as a 14, 15-year-old, this is a challenge to cope with. So what we offer are basically, we have here the top 10 of the occupation. We have 230 occupation for this cohort of young people in the age of 15 to 19. Among the tops are commercial employee. This is banking, insurance, logistic, everything. It's basically business operation behind. Then you have the retail. Retail is, people love that in Switzerland, but it has nothing to do with what you have here as the retailer. Is a very broad occupation, multi-skills competence occupation. Healthcare, people like to go in the healthcare sector in Switzerland. And then electrician, IT people, mechanical engineer, these are the top 10s. What is important is, as I mentioned, that the youngsters now, they get a federal recognized certificate. That means they are mobile on the whole Swiss labor market. Because every company knows this standard is approved by the federal government, and it has this value. I will show you later on how many people we have in Switzerland having this kind of diploma. So what is also an add-on, I would say, and the more we are in digital transformation mode, the more I would say this is a highlight which is extremely important. You see here two snapshots. One is from the manufacturing training center in Switzerland. It's showing that 15, 16-year-old youngsters are exposed to ABB robots, the YUMI. They learn with the interactive robots how to make manufacturing from a very early point on. And the cool thing is here, manufacturing is not anymore this blue-collar type of work. They see now this is cool thing, and I want to work with robots in the future because I know this is what we will have in the future everywhere. On the other side, we have a lady who is basically wearing augmented reality glass, and she's just producing a Bluetooth box through devices she gets from this augmented reality glass. So this are just some examples to show you if you can work in the, if you can learn and work in the workplace, that has an advantage because you are learning on the best available technology. Our hypothesis is for the future, only those countries who really link education and employment in the future will have a comparative advantage. Because what the digital transformation produces as an effect on education system is, the change is going faster and faster. But all of you who are working in education, they know education needs time. You cannot just change the curriculum every year. This is too much and produces basically a chaos. So the question is, if you cannot cope with the pace the industry have, then you just have to use the workplace as a learning location where you get meaningful exposure to the newest technology. This is one element, learning with the best available technology is one add-on of the workplace. Another one, which is also linked to digital transformation and the impact on education, is that you have to be embedded in teams of adults, diverse team, where you can learn from the role models, because another effect will be that the so-called 21st century skills will be in the future much more important, because these are skills you can take with you if you are affected by change in a company. These are the traits and the skills you basically learn once and then you take it with you. However, the so-called professional competencies, that's not so clear whether you can keep going with that. To show that with some data, to underline that with some data, I show you the so-called job market monitor in Switzerland. We have very good data from 1950 up to now, where the university University of Zurich is analyzing what exactly is the labor market looking for with regard to degrees and with regard to competencies. And what you basically see is the yellow curve is saying people having only compulsory education, they are not anymore on demand in the labor market. People having a so-called vocational diploma, this is this upper secondary 2 education, 50% of all job offers are still asking for this kind of people. But what we also see is higher education is also very important in the future. But this is not this kind of academic higher education we normally think when we hear the word higher education. Is this labor market-oriented professional education? I will come back to it. What basically surprised me while I saw this slide the first time is the labor market is more and more looking for soft skills, and the labor market is more and more looking for experience. So what are graduates, university graduates, doing if they have no exposure to workplace learning? They have to go to 1, 2, 3 internship to get their experience. And the pity is they are actually, especially in the US, not necessarily paid for that. So this is not a very efficient system. Now, coming back to what is the purpose of VET, so what we understand, and this is a common sense, I would say, worldwide, is we have to bridge education and employment, and the so-called dual education or the vocational education training, they basically connect these two sides, learning location, through a meaningful education process. On top of it, and this is important in the US, it must be embedded in an education system, and it must lead to progression routes. If young people, like our Molly, sorry to name you several times, but it's all about young people, if they start to realize that the degree is a dead end, it's not really attractive. So permeability is the biggest topic in education system, that you have to create a system that is permeable. The slide I show you may produce you some headaches. It's so complicated. This is the Swiss education system, and what you see are a lot of boxes and a lot of arrows. You don't need to catch everything in that slide. The only message I want to send you is the system is 100% permeable. Whatever you are doing in the age of 14, you enter somewhere and you have the whole life the chance to move on to a next level of education, either in the university or in the professional education sector. And the starting point, the majority actually in Switzerland, they start to realize, because it's so permeable, it's the solution for the majority. That means 70% of youngsters are opting for this vocational education training with apprenticeship inside. This is important, not apart, it's inside, and makes the system very strong. So the success we had in the last 10 years, or more than 10 years, is because young people start to understand it's not a dead end. We had basically growth rate from about 10% more graduates who all went into the vocational education. So from 64% up to 71% is the graduation rate in Switzerland in vocational education training. And what you see here, basically the success story, it is we were a very inclusive country, meaning those who have not the chance to get into one of the upper secondary education, through the vocational education training, they reached that goal. Now, international, basically the instruments would be available. We have the so-called International Standard Classification of Education, which basically is nothing else than level 1 to 8, a descriptor system where you can decide what are the qualification requirements for a master program at the university or for a PhD. But what is mostly not known is the same thing you have for PET, which we call professional education and training. And why is this scheme so important in the future? Normally, if you are doing college or you go to the academic career, hopefully you end up in age 30 with your PhD. This is a kind of average age. And then the question is, what next? does your education system provide any formal degree if you need to retool in the future? So this is the challenge in most of the country, and because due to the digital transformation, you and me, we have to retool ourselves several times over the lifespan. You need an alternative where you can go into the workplace, work a little bit, then you may climb up your career ladder, and then you may need another formal degree. And if that system recognizes formal degrees up to the age 60, then you can say we have really a lifelong learning system which is fully permeable. The US, unfortunately, as much I can observe that, in a lot of the states there's still this idea of college for all. If we as researchers look into the data, we would say there's a distinction between the mindset and the facts. The facts are basically showing 24% are basically in the college system. The rest is nowhere, at least not in the college. So the question is, how can you improve that? And I think this is the idea of Indiana to go into such a direction. Another observation we can make is you have also everything, but it's kind of fragmented. So you have a registered apprenticeship system where companies are involved in, but it's apart from the education system. That means the credentials don't really count for progression routes within the education system. And if I would be a student, I would say, why should I do that? Of course, it's clear some people need to do that to get into a job, but from a currency point of view, education, that's not the best solution. As we have heard, we are working with several states, especially with Colorado, and we do a lot of research there. What the Colorado initiative just managed to do is they set up a dual education program from K-11, 12, 13, and they call that this youth apprenticeship initiative in Colorado. And we were saying, cool, you have to start somewhere, and this is really a big success they reached together with the companies. But if they want to go and plan the next 10 years for the re-engineering of the system, the problem lies here. Half of the cohort following that apprenticeship scheme will not enter college. So if you claim and tell the parents, oh, that's now the new option, the better option, yes, it is definitely the one, but you have to hurry up to create an alternative path for those who are not able to enter a college degree. Otherwise, it's a dead end, still a dead end. And this is what we basically propose. Together with the industry, we should work on level 8 qualification frameworks. Now, selected outcome effects in Switzerland. We create, of course, data to compare countries. This is a so-called youth labor market index showing the situation of the young generation in the age of 15 to 24. And the higher the scores in a country is, the better. So Switzerland is basically here almost not in all the indicators on top, but in a lot of indicators, while other European countries such as Italy, France, and Finland, they especially struggling with integrating people into the labor market. If you see that index over time, you see what happens in some of the countries after the financial crisis. Italy had a breakdown on the youth labor market index, the same for Spain, Greece, all the southern European countries. And the question is, why? We were basically doing a kind of correlation between this COF, youth labor market index value, and the type of education system they have. And what we see here is the negative correlation between the youth labor market index and the type of education system they have is if you have a full-time VET program, vocational education program, is a negative correlation. That means they have difficulties to bring the people into the labor market. On the other hand, we have this so-called combined school and workplace VET system, which you see Switzerland is the front runner, followed by Denmark, Austria, and Germany. These are the countries with the highest combination of workplace learning and school learning. So our hypothesis is the better you can link actors from both systems, the higher your labor market outcome will be in the future. This is an instrument we developed to measure the strength of this cooperation. And the strength is basically a power game. You know, educators like to have the power, decision power. We decide what is in the curriculum. But what should be the case is that the employer have a say too. So it must be balanced because you in the labor market, you know what is the need of the companies better than educators do. So if you can balance this power in the decision competence, you would be better off. So we do benchmark studies on that, and here you see the ranking among the countries we are involved in that study. Again, the 4 top runners are the continental European country, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, and Denmark. And then we have here Colorado, which is not at the end. Japan is even worse, but it has not really a high index. That means they are on a good road now to create that ecosystem where companies and educators work together. Sorry, yeah, that was now the wrong point. And if you have this combination of workplace training and engagement of companies with the educators, here you see a snapshot of our innovation panel. We know what is the highest degree of the staff in the Swiss small and medium industry. And it was striking me when I saw these data the first time, 50% of the staff in the small and medium companies in Switzerland do have as a highest degree this vocational education diploma. They have a high lifetime earning, so it's not about these are, you know, people who cannot make their living out of that. No, this is the backbone of the SME industry in Switzerland. And down here you have the not even 10% are so-called conventional university degrees. That means 4-year college in your country. Not even 10%. And you know what? Switzerland is innovation leader worldwide. So the question is, how can this be possible? And the answer is because an innovation needs both, needs practical gifted people and the academics. So why does this system work in Switzerland? I have to say it has a lot to do with the governance, who is involved, and we would say in Switzerland we have this public-private partnership, well established with a strong government. The government is the facilitator, I would say, of the whole governance. The strongest partner are the so-called professional association, business association with their companies. And on the other hand, we have cantons, which are maybe in your state the counties, which are basically the owner of the schools. And they work together very closely, and it's regulated in the law. And now, why does it work? Here, a small animated film to tell you with a picture what matters in that framework. It's like a well-oiled machine. The Swiss ecosystem is like this well-oiled machine. Everybody knows what is the role, responsibility. They work together, and they share the ownership together. And this is, I would say, the recipe of the whole exercise, because without that, it's very difficult to understand and to work together. When I talk about the industry who is very committed, you see here how well we are structured. That means we have national umbrella association. These are the big industry association, the employer association, who basically deals in politics, in policy issues, and strategic planning of the whole education system, but they are committed. And this is something which I start to realize in the US I haven't seen so far. At least you have industry association, but not education committee in this industry association who could care about what the industry of banking sector, of the manufacturing sector is really looking for. Then we have about 600 national associations, the Swiss Banking Association, the Swiss Insurance Association, the Swiss Manufacturing Association. They all are in charge with developing the curriculum for a specific occupation. They develop the material and everything. So this is the organized Swiss industry, which helps a lot that companies train. And of course, because we have this kind of well-oiled machine, the companies, they are not training because of social corporate responsibility. They train because they know it's a business case, and the business case is nothing else than small economic theory. So if you have a good curriculum that guides the productivity over time, 3 to 4 years, you may have at the beginning a little bit higher costs, so that's the investment part of the whole training approach. But if that works, at the end you have a higher productivity and get the return. And I show you the research data, what we count basically on the benefit side and on the cost side. Cost is easy to calculate, and everybody complains too much costs. But if you have a look on the benefit side, then it's getting very interesting, because of course they do unskilled work if they are freshmen or at the beginning, but the curriculum over time lead them to this kind of productivity you need. And then you even can save hiring costs if you can retain them over time. Here are the results from the Swiss survey. Every 4 years we do that again with Swiss companies. See here, the ROI for a 3-year program in Switzerland is 10% for a company, and for a 4-year program it's 7.2%. And you see how much the costs are. I mean, per year, the cost for a 3-year and 4-year is almost 100,000 Swiss francs or dollars. But the productivity is even higher. So that's why we are saying this is a win-win situation for everyone, and that's why it works. And the good thing of that system is, yes, the company are paying 60% of the whole costs, but the flip side is the government has only to pay 40%, and that allows the government to equip university with much more resources and to have this kind of strong university I'm actually working in. Because the companies know it's not just the cost factor, it's the benefit they get out of the training. They prepare the next pipeline which they need for their productivity. So what we can summarize is apprentices in Switzerland are not low-paid employees. They are VET students embedded in the education system who earn a salary along the journey where they get to their diploma. What else you need, to attract people for such a solution? So I sum up, you may see, even though the food was wonderful, we get here in this economic club, you may think about, okay, what are we doing here in Indianapolis? And I can tell you what the discussion must be is, how do you see in the future the role of the employers? Are they more the type of consumers? So you consume what the university system and the college system and the high school system is delivering. Then you hire them, and then what happens? You complain. They do not have the competencies we are looking for. Or you get together with them and you coordinate your activities. That means the employers are producer and consumers on the same time. This is what we have actually. We did a study in Colorado again, because they tell, yeah, the US companies are different to Swiss companies. We cannot do that. And say, okay, let's ask. Let's ask. I'm not so sure whether they are so different than ours. And we were asking a lot of questions, but among others, we were asking what kind of skills are important in your company on a Likert scale 1 to 5. How important are those skills? And then we were asking, to some extent, you get what you want. Of course, it was lower. And the last question is, and what is the learning place you companies think is the best place to learn those competencies? See? Workplace. So I told Colorado, wow, good message. Very easy now to convince all the companies. If they say that the workplace is the place to learn, why they don't join you with the initiative, with this new apprenticeship initiative? And it works. They join. They have now a lot of companies who are willing to contribute. So I sum up and say, what we know from our research, the main aspect in the future is employers must be involved much more than just corporate social responsibility, setting qualification standards together with the educators, deciding when an update needs to happen, because you know what is in the pipeline as next product and processes, and setting also examination form, make a judgment about what is really good and what not. And the students, they must spend the majority of the time in the workplace due to the reason I just explained. So for the US, some ideas, I have a dream for you. Because you know what, I always say, if the United States can fix that problem, the rest of the world will follow you. You are the geopolitical power, not Switzerland. We may be a facilitator to help you, but if you can make that, if you can change that, I can tell you Chile, Costa Rica, the Latin American country will follow you, because they still think you have the best model. And therefore, we have to fix and find some states here who can make the difference and help young apprenticeship to really get into the company to produce that, that benefit for both, not just for the company, but also for the youngsters, and give them more valuable options to get into a decent job. And I think, yeah, starting in high school with creating clear and efficient pathway is the way to go for. And I really thank to Claire and the team of Indiana who was visiting Switzerland, 10 days hard work. They had to work from 8:30 up to 6 o'clock in the evening, really hard work. And I'm convinced that with this kind of energy, that's the reason why I'm here. If I see a team with such an energy, I cannot say no. I have to contribute to energize you so that this initiative can happen. And therefore, I invite all the 500 people in the room, join that initiative here in Indiana. It's for the better of the next generation, and I'm really looking forward to working with you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Ursula. First of all, we really appreciate you flying in from Zurich for less than 3 days to spend time with us, not only here today at this luncheon, but with our core planning team, as we're now rolling up our sleeves and trying to work on designing a system that's statewide, high quality, scalable, and then also regional pilots that can be proof points in Indiana. So thank you so much, really appreciate it. So I spent 10 intensive days with you along with 8 other folks on our team who I can see in front of me here, and it was a lot of information. I felt like I learned a lot. You just went through decades of research in 25 minutes. So let's spend just a few minutes on kind of the foundational components of what you've just shared with us to make sure everyone else has a chance to let it sink in. So the term apprenticeship, that has a particular meaning in the United States. Typically, it's the registered apprenticeship that you mentioned. It's people out of high school. It tends to be in construction, the trades, manufacturing. So when you're using the term apprenticeship, what do you actually mean by that?
That's a very good point. Basically, in Switzerland, we mean a student, a vocational education training student, who is basically opting for a formal degree accepted by the education system. It's like Intel Inside in the computer. We say it's apprenticeship inside. That means apprenticeship is just part of it. It's a part in the industry.
And from the data that you shared, it is across practically every occupation in the industry. So it's not just a narrow set of opportunities. It's very broad. Is that correct?
That's very correct, yeah, 230 options.
Okay.
And the model is basically applied in all those occupations. And over the last 20 years, we even developed more of this dual type of apprenticeships, because what we learn is the young people, especially now, and I'm always doing my coming out. I started my career with an apprenticeship in a bank, same. You know why? I was so tired to go anymore to school. And I was so interested in becoming an adult, and that means if you are embedded in an adult team where you can learn from role models, becoming independent, earn a salary, why should you go anymore to school? Of course, after the storming forming phase, I get hungry for more, and that's why you need this system which is permeable.
Well, speaking of young people, I don't know about the rest of you, but I changed my mind a lot about what I was interested in, and I did that really in college and then after in the workplace. So what about Swiss young people? Do they not change their minds? How do they change their minds? Are they allowed to?
Of course. I mean, it's a good question, yeah, and it's in a very difficult age. I mean, with 15 years, you switch to an apprentice, 70% switch to an apprenticeship. And the question is, are they mature enough to decide about what I want to become? Of course, nowadays we know you don't find the job for your whole life. It's over. It's not anymore the case. But what we want to make sure is that you are well prepared for such a decision. That means in the 7th grade, we expose them the first time to what could be and company, what does this mean? I will work in the future in a company. And they have to organize by themselves a day with their parents or with someone else they are close to just explore what is a company and in what kind of topic I'm interested in. And then every year we add more so that they have an exposure to what is possible. And of course, we have a very well-developed career guidance and counseling system where it's mandatory that parents and the kid is going to that agency to get information, what could be my options. Yeah, that's very important.
Great. Well, and then also just to emphasize that, you talked about and showed a couple of slides on the permeability of the system, and you emphasized that that is really key to the success. So can you say more about what does that actually mean? Because that's kind of a follow-on to changing your mind and having opportunities throughout your lifetime.
Yes, the permeability is becoming more and more important all over the world because of the digital transformation. And it's also important if you can tell your parents want to do the best thing for the kids. That's clear. But what is the best thing for the kid is not so clear. Especially if parents don't know the facts, they still think, yeah, college is the best thing. Was in the past like that, will be in the future like that. That's over. That's definitely not anymore the case. So then you need to have a kind of security, and the security is permeability. When I was on panels, I was saying to the parents, who cares what your youngsters is doing? They can climb up the whole life from practical to academic program, whatever they want to do. So but of course you need a system like that, which is actually not the case in all the country. But if you have this permeable system, you can be calm and say, let the kid do what they want to do now, because they will change the mindset anyway after 4-5 years. And then if you have offered them options, not really a problem.
Well, one of the questions from the audience is, how do you change the mentality of parents to support students? So can you talk a little bit about what you've observed in your work in Colorado? They're like us. They started 5 years ago from the current College for All system. What have they done and what have they observed with parents' attitudes towards this kind of opportunity for their young people?
Yeah, when I was here first time in the US working in that field, I heard the mantra, vocational education, that's something for other people's children. And I was saying, okay, why? And then I start to realize they don't understand, they don't have a modern picture of what is feasible. And what I recommended always, put the young people on the spot. Because what you see now in Colorado, if they have a lot of good video clips of those new champions who went through that system, and if you listen to what they are saying, this touches your heart. I mean, it's something emotional. And if a parent sees the kid happy, why should they not go for that? So what you need is, you need good communication, advertising material. Nowadays, it's much easier with social media, and bring the young people in the spot who are doing this kind of work and who are proud of doing this kind of work. That's the only way, because parents, they want to do the best thing for the kid, but maybe they are not so well informed what is then the best thing nowadays. I mean, if you end up with an apprenticeship system like that, you will have no debt crisis. You earn $30,000 per year as an apprentice in the age of 16, 17 years. I mean, that makes a difference. And if more people are doing that, I would say you can go faster.
Okay. Well, and I have to ask, so part of the 10-day experience was site visits to different companies in totally different sectors. One of the most memorable was Swiss Post Office, where they do banking transactions, they sell cell phones, they do a whole host of other things. It was all run by apprentices, ages 14 up to 18. That was pretty extraordinary. It was a very professional, well-run shop. So is there something different about Swiss adolescents, or in your work around the world, is this actually possible for all young people, including in Indiana?
It will be possible. I mean, the kids are not the problem, I would say. The problem, sorry to say, are more the adults. Because I shared that this morning. When I was the first time here, I listened to people, I say, yeah, my kid, and they were talking about the 28-year-old youngster. So you call that kid? I mean, in Switzerland, we call the 15, 16-year exposed to workplace training young professionals, because they like to be treated as a young professional. And that's the attitude. So we trust, I mean, we prepare them six weeks, something, to really be ready to work in a work environment. But I can tell you, our experience is after 6 months, they turned into an adult. 15 years is turning into an adult. And if you treat them as an adult, they can do it. So I would just say it's more the problem of adults than the problem of the kids. The kids, I would say, we can ask Holly or Molly whether she agree, but I would say the kids here are not different, but they need to get this trust. We need to tell them we have a confidence, you can do it, and we have to observe them, of course, and help them when it's really necessary.
So we need to be stopping helicopter parents, essentially,
yes,
is what you're saying. Okay. There are several questions around the actual experience, and this ties into the dead end comment that you made. No young person or their parent is going to be interested in an experience that leads to a dead end. And again, this is only something that I realized spending quite a bit of time in Switzerland, is that the apprenticeship is not short-term training for a specific entry-level job. It's really much broader. You're learning about the industry sector, an entire career pathway, and that's also another element that leads to the permeability. So can you talk a little bit more about how that sets a young person up for true lifelong success the way that it's designed in Switzerland?
Yeah, the big difference, I would say, is because we are saying this is more an education, it's not a narrow job placement, it's an education. It must be broad. And we have, when I was in charge with that system, we have huge fights with the employers because they were saying, no, we need this narrow skill set here and there. And I say, no, these are students, and we have to equip them in this age with broad skills, because we know from research when they are 25-year-olds, they move from one occupational field to the next. So if they are trained to narrow, they will not be able to be mobile. So what we really invested in these 21st century skills, that is every 230 occupation need to train in these soft skills, because that enables them to be mobile. So this is extremely important, and it's also, I mean, we want to have a kind of alternative in the education system, because we know, if they finish with 20, 22, they may work 2 or 3 years, and then they move on to a next either education or in a job career to a next job position.
So another related question, the 70% of young people that are choosing this VET route, are they just not learning anymore about world history or languages? I mean, how does that part of the education also continue for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, they do learn. It depends on the occupation. I have to say, what we invented mid-90s is a so-called vocational baccalaureate. Because we did 2 big inventions, and that was, the first was vocational baccalaureate, and the other was University of Applied Sciences, which are university, but with research projects together with the industry. And for that, they need more general education than they just had in the normal VET diploma, and there, of course, they have history, science, everything in that curriculum. However, and this is maybe a difficult answer I have to tell you, We are convinced that we need to give the competencies and skills the people need to be top in their occupation. We are winning in Switzerland the quality competition. That means everybody needs to have a high quality, but not necessarily in history when they are hairdresser, you know. So that means, yes, we compromise. Not everyone needs really to go through history the whole life. Of course, they must be a good citizen. So we are a direct democratic country. They have all history to the extent that they are good citizen, but they don't need to go through the same syllabus as you have at the high school, because we are saying that they can do later on if they really want to do it.
And what about things like sports and music, which are a big part of the high school experience in the United States?
Yes, sport is mandatory part of the vocational education training curriculum. Music, here you hit a weak point. I was fighting the whole time when I was in the government for having better support for VET students who want to develop their musical competencies, because I myself was not having that chance, and I actually, as an older lady, tried to learn to play saxophone, and therefore I fully support this as a weakness in Switzerland. Yes.
Okay, good to know. You made the really important point, and the secret sauce that you called it was the shared ownership, which is easy to say and hard to execute. So can you talk a little bit more about the different actors that are in the system? What is how do you find the right balance between education and employers? What about government? That's where you spent much of your career actually actively working on policies and trying to improve the system through a systematic approach to policy improvements. So how does that all work in your view in 2 minutes?
Well, I consider myself, the role I had previously always as a facilitator. It's like in a circus, you have to make sure that everybody understands the role and plays the role perfectly, and help them to get into understanding their role. This is basically the duty of the leader. Government in Switzerland in vocational education training has the lead, but the lead means facilitator. So in the real need, in the driver's seat, are the professional association in Switzerland. So this is 600 association for each occupation. We have one, and they know that they have to come up with the new ideas. What is the new occupation? What is the occupation of the future in this or that industry? And we help them to establish the curriculum in the sense that we just are the facilitator to bring educators, cantons, employers together for a reform committee so that they really can fulfill all the requirements which we have to observe. But this is basically what we call shared ownership. It only works if every part, like in a music, in a symphony orchestra, if every section know how to play that part, then you have music. If one is weak, you have to help them to come to the level where we think that it sounds very good, that music.
So you're working in the United States, Colorado, there's South Carolina, there's Washington, there's other states that are all thinking about this. What do you think is the right model for facilitator? Does it depend based on the factors in the state, or is there a clear facilitator lead or driver from your perspective?
Oh, I learned in the US, you have local control is important to you. And this is a hindering factor for shared ownership. It's basically the opposite, So you need to have a role model in place somewhere where you can go and have a look at, which is not Switzerland. It's working in a US condition. And that's why we are actually helping Colorado to get a system re-engineering done as a role model state. And then, of course, other states can go and have a look, but I have to say every state will be different. So we are also working with California. It's a totally different culture there. It's huge. And then we are working with Washington, D.C. or with New York City. And I have to accept, I would consider a state like a country worldwide. And you have to understand from scratch where are cultural differences, what is the economic condition, what kind of industry do they have. That that is what you have to do. So US is a continent almost with 50 states, and every state is different. So you may have a facilitator as Colorado, but at the end you can share curriculum. I would share curriculum between Indiana and Colorado, but not necessarily between California and Colorado, because these labor markets are different. And that is what you have to understand. You have to get a good feeling what is shareable and what is not shareable. And the facilitator, where we think about having an institute in the US to help the advanced state to get to the next step of engineering, meaning from learning from Colorado, what are after having a good pilot project, the proof of concept, what could be the next step in that re-engineering process. And as you have seen in my slides, I have tons of ID, what you need to get really a well-permeable system that is attractive for the majority of your youngsters.
Last question. I asked you this last night. You spend an awful lot of time going all around the world. You were 2 weeks in Nepal, Serbia, Latin American countries, states, the United States. Why are you doing this work? What has led you to try to help other people implement aspects of the Swiss system in their countries?
Yeah, when I was in my former position, I was officially traveling around. These were these kind of superficial visits in countries where you just see what a pity it is for the young generation not having really good solution. And I was going home and saying to my staff, it's very easy to fix a memorandum of understanding. It's much more difficult to help a state to fix that problem. And that's why when I decided to retire from that position, my dream was, okay, now I have to fix the problem. What do we need from research to help countries? Because I think the young generation nowadays is in trouble. And the only thing we can do as our generation, we can help them to overcome their troubles. And this is, for me, a very worthwhile.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming to Indianapolis, spending your lunchtime with us, and the next couple of days advising the Indiana team.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.